So there's like this tiny, very socially awkward YouTuber who loves to make videos calling out the Tankies. He loves to call them out in the name of anarchism. But anyway, aside from all of that, we have a great video here. YouTubers are not political analysts. Hasan's analysis of Ukraine failed. Wow. So this is one of those videos where someone's like, hey, you said you thought that Russia wouldn't invade Ukraine, and then they invaded. And like this current, because this is not isolated. This is basically something that a bunch of uncritical morons love to say. People like who are completely incapable of assessing evidence, of, using their brains, who just sort of base their conclusions off nothing, are incapable of looking back, or even incapable of remembering how things were then, because they were obviously participating in these arguments then, and thinking, okay, what evidence was there at this point to believe that Russia was going to invade Ukraine? We had the US government saying it. Now, is the US government a reliable source on their geopolitical enemies? Let's just say no, they aren't, obviously. We had the fact that Russia was building up military forces on Ukraine's border, except we also knew that they had done that previously at least 2 times within the last 7 to 8 years. And in those occasions too, the US government had also warned they were going to invade. So we had reason to believe that they wouldn't invade because they had done the same thing before. So basically it was like a he said, she said thing, Russia being like, oh, we're definitely not going to invade. These are definitely just, military exercises that we are for some reason doing on Ukraine's border as we have before. And then we had the US saying, we will definitely invade. And then we had the Ukrainian government who mostly said that they thought Russia wasn't going to invade, and that was pretty much it. Oh, and then you had like US-based think tanks posting like satellite images of the Russian buildup on the border, US government-adjacent think tanks posting that shit, and that was really all there was. But there are anarchists who love this thing that they call open source intelligence. Now, what open source intelligence is a euphemism for is just videos they see on Twitter. Like they like to LARP as like intelligence agents, I guess. So when they see like a video posted on Twitter, they repost it themselves and they're like, I'm a CIA agent. I'm providing open source intelligence. Just posting like a random video that they saw some Russian soldier post on like a Telegram channel or something, or they saw someone else find that and post it. None of this open source intelligence provided any more reason to believe that Russia was going to invade or not. Any sort of assessment of the evidence at the time, okay, the US is saying they're going to invade, that's pretty much meaningless. They've said that before. Russia is building up forces on the border. Okay, they've done that before too, and they didn't invade those times. A bunch of US think tanks are trying to back up the US government's claims. Yeah, of course they are. A bunch of random anarchists who think they're like the anarchist CIA posted some irrelevant videos on Twitter that don't show anything to really change the assessment of the evidence one way or the other. Okay, and then we can think about also like the reasons for and against Russia invading Ukraine. Reason against, how the fuck would they possibly invade Ukraine and succeed? Obviously, Russia could take and occupy, for example, the so-called independent republics in the Donbass and stuff like that. But actually, meaningfully taking territory in Ukraine, that's incredibly fucking hard. And you can see how fucking illogical the invasion turned out to be based on how it's gone so far. I and Hasan both made the same assessment that, how do you invade a fucking a highly militarized country, by the way, because Ukraine has become very militarized ever since the last 10 years or so of conflict began. So how the fuck would Russia, which is a relatively poor country, invade and take over Ukraine in an overland invasion where people are, they're going to be fighting to the fucking death against it? How? And that has sort of been, proven post hoc in the fact that that's literally what's happened. Russia, has resorted to mass conscription of random people because that professional military can't do it. That Russia ended up doing something illogical, something with a rational explanation, sure, because, they want to take Ukraine, because they want to rule over Ukraine, they want its resources, etc. Just because it has a rational explanation doesn't mean that it was something that they could logically achieve, at least right now, and they haven't been able to do it. So we add that to the compounding evidence. It's like, well, the evidence of them having troops on the border, that's happened before. The US said the same thing about that a lot the other times it happened. What reason do we have to believe this time is any different? And then there's the fact that it would be illogical for them to invade in the first place because they're just going to get fucked up, which they were. So if you look at the evidence, at the time, the only assessment to make there would be probably Russia wasn't going to invade. The only reason they would invade is if they are very stupid. And they turned out to be very stupid. So Perhaps Hasan said it like too strongly, but any reasonable assessment of the evidence available at the time would have made it seem like Russia was probably not going to invade. You'll see in this video, there is no effort to actually dispute the claims that Hasan was making using the evidence that was available at the time. It's just pointing at them and being like, haha, look, he was wrong. When, if this is like proof of him not being a good political analyst, if anything, you're providing proof of him being a good political analyst because he looked at the evidence available at the time and came to the only reasonably decent conclusion at the time, which is that it probably is not any reason to believe strongly either way as to what their intentions are. If anything, it should have probably been an indication that they were not going to invade. So let's watch this amazing video by someone who is certainly very good at assessing evidence and certainly not just making a video about a Tankie streamer who I hate because he's a Tankie. He doesn't support Taiwan, the country that I moved to be a sexpat in. Ugh! You know who is a political analyst? Me.
A progressive Twitch streamer and self-described socialist.
What the fuck is this accent? Jesus Christ.
Whose channel content consists mainly of reaction videos and video gameplay. He occasionally makes political statements and engages in online drama. Prior to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Hasan was insisting it would never happen and that warnings of Russia's imminent attack were simply Western propaganda.
They literally were. Where did they come from? They came directly from the US government. How is statements coming directly from the US government not Western propaganda? Explain. This is an anarchist, by the way. I love to be an anarchist and to be very critical of information provided by the world's hegemonic imperial power, aka state.
On the 15th of February 2022, Hasan posted a stream entitled, I Was Right.
I love the way that this is framed, by the way. It's like a fucking Murdoch Press expose or something. It's incredible.
About war in Ukraine, and most were wrong, in which he claimed he had been proven right about his denial.
No, it's a really fucked up Australian accent from someone who doesn't really go outside, so doesn't really have much interaction with other people.
An invasion, making these statements.
I was right about Ukraine. That's right. War is not imminent. Oh, shocked. Shocked to find out.
On the 16th of...
He said that because there was a claim directly from the US government that Russia was going to invade on that specific day. It didn't happen. That's why he made that TikTok. You could maybe provide the context for that, which he didn't.
February, Hasan made additional statements claiming he had been correct and mocking the idea that Ukraine would ever be invaded by Russia.
But America's like, not that, and flailing around for the past 2 months saying like, no, Russia's literally going to do this. Russia's going to invade tomorrow. Russia's going to invade next.
Yeah, they made like 4 different statements, or maybe it was 2 or 3, with specific dates saying when Russia was going to invade, and it didn't happen. So he was assessing the evidence available at the time, which was the US government making very specific claims, diffusing, obvious propaganda coming directly from it, where they were saying they're going to invade on this date, on that date. Hasan saw that and he was like, well, they're bullshitting about this. And he was right. You wonder why that context is being removed here. I wonder why.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Like a bunch of QAnon supporters saying that like the storm is coming.
On the 17th of February, Hasan posted a tweet in which he insisted Russia would not invade Ukraine, saying, quote, "This is the hill I will die on. Russia cannot launch an urban counterinsurgency war in a neighboring country with 44 million people with or without NATO support."
He was right. They can't. They couldn't. And he was right about that, hilariously. When the US was saying otherwise, like the US intelligence analysts, US experts, US government shills were saying otherwise. If Russia invades Ukraine, it's all over. They can't defend shit. Like, have they not learned anything from their own attempts to invade and genocide other countries at this point? To see how fucking incredibly difficult that is to actually achieve? And that's with a much stronger and better equipped military, with a much better backing economy than Russia has.
This is why I have been saying he won't invade Ukraine. Not because of anything else. He's a bad person, not a mad one.
Did you look at like what he was saying here? Did you see if that was true or not? It was. It was. So if you're making this video to yell at him for not being correct about Russia doing something that we had very little evidence to believe in, and that also it was illogical for them to do that, went against their own material interests to do, and then saying he's dumb for not foreseeing that, can't we also say that you're dumb for not foreseeing that Russia could not launch an urban counterinsurgency war in a neighboring country with 44 million people? Does this not go both ways? Does your own logic, does your own standards not go both ways? Are you going to be apologizing for not seeing that? Of course not.
Quote, Russia invaded Ukraine 6 days later on the 24th of February, proving Hasan wrong. On the 18th of February...
Like, the only mistake that Hasan made here was to not couch his statements in reasonable doubt. Not to say, like, my assessment is that I don't think they will invade, all the evidence doesn't really point towards them invading, so why would we come out and say that they will invade? The only mistake is that he was too sure in these statements. It's not that his assessment of the evidence was wrong or incorrect.
Hasan made additional statements claiming he had been correct.
I think maybe I'll tell my editors to do this, but I think I'll just change I'll change this every day to Ukraine has still not been invaded by Russia every day. Change it to
Again, they were making specific claims of when Ukraine was going to be invaded with specific dates and times. That's what he's referring to here, which he of course removed the context of.
Russia still has yet to invade Ukraine. And it's like day 11 at this point, you know what I mean?
Russia invaded Kyiv just a week later, on February the 25th, proving Hasan wrong again.
How'd they prove him wrong when he is referring to claims coming from the US government that were saying Russia is going to invade on this day, on this day, on this day, at this time? That didn't happen. Now, this is another thing. If you're to look at this logically, from even the most neutral standpoint possible, you look at a state filtering propaganda, claiming that its rival state is going to invade at any time, based on nothing than their own assessment. You're basically, dude, trust me on this one. That's them crying wolf multiple times, okay? And famously, when you cry wolf multiple times, that gives people more reasons to disbelieve you. When the US government was wrong about something 2 or 3 times in a row, when they filtered specific dates and times when Russia would supposedly invade, it didn't happen. That is compounding evidence to believe that Russia would not invade, because the only thing that we had to go off at the time was what the US was saying. And obviously, they were discrediting themselves with every false prediction that they made. So that gives us more reason to disbelieve what they were saying. It's a very simple assessment of the evidence that this guy is not capable of making.
On the 22nd of February, after Russia had invaded Donbass, Hasan posted a video entitled "I Was Wrong About Ukraine," in which he acknowledged his previous statements had been wrong, and in which he rejected Russia's claim the military operation was merely a peacekeeping mission.
I think that the peacekeeping mission is literally, that's it. That's overtaking eastern Ukrainian territories. That's absolutely invasion. That is happening. I was wrong. I assumed that we could actually have diplomatic talks. I'm wrong. I was wrong. I did not even think that Russia would take over eastern territories, and I was wrong. I think that if they...
The conclusion being wrong, based on the available evidence that you had at the time, only with hindsight, doesn't mean that the conclusion was bad at the time, because it was based on a good assessment of the evidence that was available at the time. It's like looking back at a historian from 1980 before the Soviet archives were opened and being like, oh, the Soviet archives proved them wrong. Ergo, they were engaging in faulty scholarship. No, they were engaging with the evidence that was available at the time. They don't have superpowers to see what would happen in the future. Okay, it's that simple.
Actually, if the reports are true, because there's been a lot of information that has been wrong, completely wrong.
Hasan made it clear he believed the Russian military operation in Donbass was an unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine territory, with which he totally disagreed.
They claim there's Russians there. This is an independent area annexation, okay? Literally understand where I'm coming from. Crimea is different.
As his chat pushed him to make clear statements that Russia was now indisputably committing imperialist acts, Hasan repeatedly acknowledged this was true, insisting he...
Oh my god, look at the indignation in his I never go outside voice. You repeatedly dodged that this was true.
He had always been against Russian invasion of Ukraine.
You admit that Russia's doing imperialism, right? Yes, dude. What the fuck do you want?
How was he ever not against the invasion of Ukraine? Because he didn't think that it would happen based on a thorough and good assessment of the evidence at the time. Does that mean that he was for the invasion? What? If I said today that I don't think the US is going to invade Haiti within the next year, because I don't think that's going to happen anymore, because their attempt to legitimize doing so has failed, and then it happens. Does that mean that, I was wrong based on an assessment of the evidence? Does that mean that I support that happening? Or would it just mean that I made a decent assumption based on the evidence available to me at the time that turned out to be wrong because they did something that was not in line? They ended up doing something that was not in line with the evidence available to me. That means that I support it? It's all illogical. And this video makes zero effort to actually, get into the nitty-gritty, to the meat of what Hasan was saying here, what he was basing his claims on, what he was actually responding to in the first half of the video, to just be point at what ended up happening without looking at why he thought what he thought at the time. Because then I guess this Anarchist channel would have to sort of base its conclusions off US government claims which had little backing. What they told us about what they knew had little backing. Perhaps in private, in the shadows, they knew way more than they were telling us, but they didn't tell us. They didn't give us the evidence that they had. So we were just going off them telling us what was going to happen without showing us the evidence for it. So what the fuck can you do about that aside from be like, it's the fucking US government saying the same sort of shit, crying wolf for the 800,000th time to delegitimize one of their enemy states? Why would you assume that Russia was going to invade and they were right about that, rather than thinking the far more logical conclusion? They're just making shit up as they always do, obviously.
Of course, that's like taking over this territory, regardless of whatever their fucking position is unacceptable. I
If you don't trust the CIA, then who do you trust?
Imperialism. Like, who cares? Yes, imperialism. Russia is doing an imperialism. Oh my lord, dude. I've been anti-fucking Russia invading Ukraine since day one. I don't know why the fuck you dumbasses think that I'm like pro-Russia invading Ukraine. I'm vindicating your points of view.
Hasan also defended himself against his own chat after being criticized for backpedaling on his views.
You could say
criticized by your own chat? Like, what is this? Who cares? Who cares? Dude, there's not like a single refutation of any actual argument being made in this video, just like pointing and looking. You're supposed to be angry at this. Do you see this Tankie? Look at this Tankie. Tankie says thing that I know like. I know going to talk about how we come to these conclusions. Me simply no like. Ooga booga.
Backpedal Andy all you fucking want, but that's because you're a brain-dead idiot who cannot comprehend that new information comes out that changes my analysis.
However,
this video isn't trying to make a point. It's just trying to like point at the signifiers that the audience wants to see. That's all. That's how this fucking YouTube shit works, man.
Hasan still attempted to salvage some credibility in the same video, insisting Kyiv would not be invaded.
What I'm showing you right now is literally fucking people talking about like bombing Kiev, okay? Their take was Ukraine is going to be invaded. Kiev is going to be invaded by Russia. That is insane. That's psychotic. And there's still a lot of information.
How is it not insane and psychotic? For one, the idea that Russia could have invaded and taken Kiev, that they even tried, it was insane and psychotic. Who the fuck would have thought they would have tried that? Who would have thought they could have ever succeeded doing that? They got fucking ass blasted trying to do it too, in the most embarrassing way possible. And now all the Russia supporters are like, they never wanted to take Kiev in the first place. It was you know, just done as a distraction and shit like that. Like, dude, it was like one of the most catastrophically failed military operations in modern history. And why would you think they wouldn't do it? Well, because how the fuck could they have ever possibly succeeded? That's insane. Utterly insane. The fact they ended up doing it was totally insane. And Hasan's assessment of that here is completely in line with that. It was crazy as fuck. So like, again, the guy's not actually looking at the evidence. Like, why would you have thought they would have invaded Kiev? Like, everything that Russia has done throughout this war has been so inexplicable from a strategic standpoint that it can only be chalked up to idiocy, incompetence, hubris, because none of it, like from a logical standpoint, has made any sense. So to just point at this and be like, Hasan dumb because of this, is very dumb.
Information that the Western State Department is pumping out by way of mainstream media about like Russia is going to go.
Look, a Russian invasion of the Donbass, only the Donbass, that would have, you know, maybe with some other invasions elsewhere to support that invasion materially, but with the goal of possibly withdrawing to like the like borders of the Luhansk and the next republics or whatever, and annexing them or whatever. They could have done that. That would have been a logical thing to assume they would have done. They have pushed so far beyond that. And I also think if they had done that, Ukraine probably wouldn't have retaliated enough to turn things into a full-scale war, because luckily the Ukrainian side in general, since Russia started aggressing against Ukraine, has been, you know, they didn't try to reinvade Crimea back then. They didn't try to, you know, launch a full-scale retaking of Donbass or whatever, because I think they know that to some degree, doing so is just going to fucking kill people. But Russia, you know, going beyond that is so illogical, so completely out of line with their own interests, because there's no fucking way they could have done so, and even less of a way they could have done so without experiencing absolutely fucking massive consequences for doing so, because obviously the West was going to end up sanctioning them in response. Obviously the West was going to funnel arms to Ukraine. You don't even need an intelligence assessment for that. They should have known that would happen. So how they could ever have thought that that would work, it boggles the fucking mind. And for Hasan to have thought that it wouldn't work, that they wouldn't do it because obviously it wouldn't have worked, is not some sort of point against Hasan. It's a point for basic logic and reason, which you clearly don't have the capacity for.
Overtake Kiev and they're going to go into Ukraine, but...
Of course, Russia invaded Kyiv just 2 days later, on the 25th of February, proving Hasan wrong again.
That didn't prove Hasan wrong. In order to prove him wrong, you would need to go over the evidence that there was for this at the time, and show that with the evidence available at the time, not evidence from the future, not like with, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, that this was going to happen. That 100% there was no reason to assume that it wouldn't. You might have trouble with that because you've done nothing but make these claims in hindsight for the entire video without even trying to make any effort of any assessment into what was actually being said.
Although Hasan is to be credited for acknowledging he was wrong, he later took down the videos in which he made his most erroneous predictions.
He shouldn't have, because his predictions were based on, they were logical based on the evidence available at the time. It's just regrettable that he was too strong in like being 100% sure about saying it, rather than, saying like, I'm 80% sure or whatever.
Does not inspire confidence in his sincerity. Here is a summary of Hasan's
This video
claims.
does not. Here's a summary. Okay, I think we can skip the summary. I think we're okay. Like, yeah. I just wanted to go over this because it's a really fucking embarrassing video. It just goes to show the lack of the evidence required for these people to come to the conclusions, believe in what they believe. It's because their beliefs are not based on evidence. Their beliefs, honestly, are just based on whatever they feel like believing, and they're perfectly happy to just use like American government propaganda to back them up. That's all there is to it. And yeah, this one belongs in the LULAG.